sample for the ABQ Sewing Studio, and it is the Press On Panel right here by Janet Wecker Frisch. So I am the owner of the ABQ Sewing Studio in Strathroy, Ontario, and we are a baby lock dealer, and we service and sell baby lock machines, as well as servicing all other makes and models of sewing machines. And another nice thing about our store is we give you unlimited lessons to learn to use your sewing machine. All right, so the quilt I'm making this weekend has a mitered corner, and some of you might not know how to do that, so I thought I'd just quickly touch on how you do a mitered corner. So consider this the center of my quilt, and what I'm going to do is turn it over, and I'm going to mark 1/4 of an inch. Oops, that's not showing up too well. 1/4 of an inch in from each corner. And you can measure that, but I'm pretty good at eyeballing it. And then you're going to take the strips that you've been told to cut, and you're going to fold them in half and mark the halfway point. And we'll flip this over, and we'll find the halfway point of this as well on each side. This time we're marking on the right side. Okay, and then we match our halfway points. This is pretty generous, my little piece here. I'm just going to grab some pins, so I'm going to reach over here. Excuse me. And this will be pinned in place. Mark the halfway point here. And match that up on this side. Then I'm just going to go to my sewing machine. And I will stitch from my dot over here. There, okay. And I will back stitch to that 1/4 inch dot. And I'll do this on both the long edges and on the short edges. We'll do the long edges first. There's that dot. Back stitch. And I'll do the opposite side, dot to dot. And then we're going to press that out. Press it flat. Careful of your dots. You're going to need those. And then press it towards the border. Okay, so now we're going to do the short ends and just crease that. Match into the center. If you've got some kind of a pattern on your fabric that you want centered, just cut your piece so that it is in the center. Got kind of a long chunk here. I can remove some of it. There. Okay. Now we're going to sew again from dot to dot. And you don't want to overstitch this. Going like a scared bunny here. So I'm going to sew up to my dot. Got my machine on super fast, so I'll dial it back a little. Okay, and again, from dot to dot. We have something that looks like this, and what we want to do is to fold these border pieces together so that they line up, just like that, one on top of the other. And I'm just going to go grab a ruler that has a 45-degree angle line, and I'll show you what to do with that. So depending on the width of your border, you might need to use a larger ruler, but this one will be fine. So I just want to make sure that all that is aligned. Okay, and it wouldn't hurt to use a pin. Okay, and there's a 45-degree angle mark on my ruler. And what I want to do is line that up to the bottom of my border, and my stitching ends right here. So I want to draw a line. Okay, and then I will stitch on that line. So I'll just add another pin. And starting just where that stitching ended, don't overstitch it. Right. So now what we want to do, and I would use a rolling cutter for this, but let's just use scissors. I would trim my 1/4-inch seam. I would take it to the iron. Open the seam. There we go. And the press. There we go. And I'll do one more time. Gee, those even match up, those circles. That's cool. That wasn't planned. It just happened. Okay. So there's one. We kind of pinch everything together. Line up our border strips. Just mark where my stitching ends here. Grab a ruler. Where's my line there? Okay. And I'll draw a line and stitch it. Trim it to that 1/4 of an inch. I'll press that open, and then I will have 2 nice angles. So it's not that difficult. I know a lot of people shy away from it, but it's pretty quick and easy and kind of fun too. I used my Baby Lock Cornet quilting machine to quilt daisies, loops, and leaves on my project. I actually quilted it in the evening last night, so the light was terrible, so I didn't take any pictures of the actual quilting process. And once done, it was time to bind the quilt. So here's what I did instead that was a bit different. I've sewn the binding on by machine using a special binding foot. First, I joined all of the 2.5 inch binding strips together. So you're all aware of how to put binding together, and generally what we do is we, place one over the other at right angles and draw a line and stitch along the line, right? But did you know that there are machines that have like a guiding light, a laser light? So watch over here. There's a little red light, and it is exactly in the middle of where your stitching line is. So instead of drawing all these lines all the time, you can use a machine like this, and this is a Baby Lock. It's a crescendo I'm sewing on, but it's very much like the chorus. Use that as your line, and you save an awful lot of time by not having to draw line after line after line. This also comes in handy when doing half square triangles. If you're making a square in a square or something like that, you can do a perfectly straight line without drawing a bunch of lines. So that's just a tip to make life easier. Then I trimmed the quilt even with the outer border. Usually I leave a 1/4 of an inch batting beyond the border, but for this method, which is quick and easy, I trimmed everything even, batting, binding, and backing. Using my walking foot, I sewed the binding to the back of the quilt. Binding to the front of the quilt, and here's where it gets interesting. So here's the foot that I'm going to be using to bind from the front. It's the quilt binding foot. This is a Baby Lock foot, and I'll just show you what it looks like underneath. So it's quite a wide foot, and if you can see, there's a ridge here. So this is kind of the high area, and this is the low area. So the low area slides along the higher part of your quilt, and the higher side goes to the lower side. Makes sense because it all becomes even. So I'm going to put it on. And it just snaps on. There. And what I'm going to be doing with this foot so that it becomes invisible is I'm going to be using monofilament thread. And this is a polyester product. It's not nylon, so it doesn't melt if you iron it. And it's basically like a fish line, invisible. And I've got it in the top, but not in the bottom. If you try and wind it on your bobbin, it's kind of got some stretch to it. You know, if you're fishing, it can take some tugging, right? So you can't put it on your plastic bobbin because when you wind it, it will actually snap your bobbin. The tension will break your bobbin. So you don't want to put it in there, but we don't need it in there. So I'm using a white thread on the bottom that will, you know, match what I've done here. Okay, I have pinned this, and you might want to do the same, or you might just be able to hold things in place and maybe just pin at the corners. So in the corners, we've got that nice mitered corner. But anyway, I place my foot down and it naturally wants to sit where it belongs. So this higher side fits to the lower side and the lower side fits to the higher side. And I've just got a regular stitch length and off we go. And I'll remove my pins as I come to them. But honestly, I think if you're a confident sewer, you really only have to pin the corners to, you know, be ready for them. And this is such a nice way to save a little bit of time. Not a little bit, a lot of time actually, because we all know how long it takes to bind a quilt. So the needle naturally goes just a smidgen into the fabric of the binding, but you can adjust your needle too to change it a little closer, a little further away. So here I am approaching the corner. Just get my foot under there. And I'm using my stiletto to hold things in place somewhat. So stiletto, it's kind of a little extra set of hands. So I stitch into the next piece, and then I'm going to turn and I'll just carry on. Use my stiletto just to keep that even. Pulling my pins out, trying not to jab myself. Okay, so over here, you can see that that's nigh invisible, right? Nobody's gonna see that. And then at the back, I've got the white thread, which just disappears into the backing because it's a little bit, this is a little bit further over than where this was attached, so it doesn't really show up at all. So isn't that a nice quick way to get those quilts done that have been lingering in your closet, waiting for you to have a few hours to hand bind them? And that's it. The quilt is finished. Very quick to put together, nice and easy with the binding technique and the mitered corners, and we will have kits available in store, and of course the fabric is always available on the bolt. Thanks for joining me. I'm Brenda Miller for the ABQ Sewing Studio in Strathroy, Ontario.